me okay? Yes, good. Welcome to the fifth in a series of 6 Meet the Regulator events. We're delighted to be here in Glasgow this afternoon and delighted that all of you have come along to join us. Great to see such a mix of people from the third sector world. To maybe introduce myself first, my name's Pat Armstrong. I've been 4 years now on the board of OSCR. In my day job, I'm Chief Executive of ACOSFO, which is the Association of Chief Officers of Scottish Voluntary Organisations. So I work with about 500 Chief Executives of charities across Scotland. So it's fascinating to be involved in both the governance side and the strategic and operational side and the leadership of charities. I also chair Scotland's Third Sector Governance Forum, so we lead on Trustee Week in Scotland. So we've got about 300 trustees, board members, chairs and vice chairs coming along to events in November this year. So lots happening in this area. So my job as chair is to sort of take you through the programme and to try and keep us to time. So I'll do my best to do that. In terms of housekeeping, we're not expecting an alarm. If an alarm does go, if you just go straight through the doors you came in and turn to your left, and you gather in Cambridge Street car park. Toilets are back through the door, slightly to your right and up the stairs, and there is an accessible one at the bottom of the stairs. So feel free if you want to nip out. In terms of telephones, more than happy for you to be tweeting. There is Menti, which you will see, which we're going to be asking some questions on later. It'd be great if you could have them on silent. I'm just hoping mine is. That would be the worst thing ever. We also have a hashtag for this afternoon, which is hashtag MTCR 2017. So if you are tweeting, if you'd like to add that. There's a few people I'd like to introduce you to that are here this afternoon. We've got quite a few of the OSCR staff. This is Meet the Regulator, so hopefully you've got a chance to meet and chat to quite a few of the members of staff. If you could maybe wave, I think they're at the back of the room, so you might have to turn around a wee bit. We've got Wendy Marsden, I can see waves, our inquiry officer, Anne Story, who's the registration business manager, Mary Toge, who's the casework policy manager, yep, lots of hands, Judith, the communications and website officer, Ian, communications manager, Paula, our engagement manager, and Norman, who's our charity accounts manager, and I think is going to help me with the difficult questions later on. We've got quite a few others that I'd like to say a quick thank you very much for coming along and helping us organise this afternoon. You'll have seen the stands as you came in, so in the break it would be great if you could get a chance to go around and have a chat to people. So thanks very much to Janice at Scottish Council on Deafness, Tony and Angela from GCVS, Mary at Scottish Mediation, Emma and Alec from the Institute Fundraising, Gillian from the Fundraising Standards Panel, and also we're delighted today to have our interpreters with us. We have Andrew and Maureen who are doing the sign language, and Jackie and Gordon who are going to be doing the speech to text, which is a good reminder for me to maybe slow down a little bit. Hope I'm not having to make you work too hard. So to maybe quickly mention the programme and what we're going to be covering this afternoon, I think we do have it coming up here, hopefully. There we go. So we're going to go through a bit about what this event's about, what you can expect to hear, a bit about OSCR. David's going to give us a bit of an update, some of the key information. We're going to have 2 other speakers, and there'll be the opportunity for you to chat, hear from each other, and ask some questions as well. And then after the break, we'll be have Jude giving us a bit of a talk on the trustees' annual report. So that's the programme for this afternoon. Hopefully you'll find it useful, informative and enjoyable, and get a chance to meet and chat to a few other board members and trustees. So I think that's everything I had to mention. So can I firstly introduce David Robb. David is Chief Exec of OSCR and is going to take you through the first part of the session. David.
Thank you, Pat. I'm told you've got a better chance of hearing me if I stand here, so is that working at the back? Yeah. Okay, I'm delighted to be back in Glasgow for one of these events. These roadshows are really important for us. It's a great chance for us to get out and connect directly with charity trustees. How many trustees have we got in the room? Quick show of hands. Fantastic, you're in the right place, and we're delighted to see you all. We have a team of 50 staff. You've got a few of them here today, based in an office up in Dundee, but we don't get too many visitors. It's a great chance when we come out on the road to connect directly with you and make sure that we are staying in touch with the issues that are important to you in running your charities, and we try and be a responsive regulator. So it's a really good opportunity for you just to flag up with us anything where we could offer a bit of help and guidance. So we've designed an afternoon that we hope is quite interactive. There's a little bit of listening, but hopefully also plenty of chance for you to learn from each other and do a bit of networking. So I'm going to make a few short opening remarks just to tune you into the world as the charity regulator sees it. So our purpose today is to just to help you understand a bit more about what OSCR, the regulator, does. As I say, to share with you some key information and to give you a chance to ask us questions and raise some issues with us. So what is OSCR? It's a strange acronym. It stands for Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator, a bit of a mouthful. But we were established 11 years ago now. There was an act, one of the early acts that went through the Scottish Parliament to create a dedicated charity regulator for Scotland. So the Charities Commission for England and Wales has been running for quite a long time, and based on that model, the Scottish Charity Regulator was established 11 years ago, and we inherited from the Inland Revenue a list of the organisations that were thought to be charities. The list needed quite a lot of cleaning up. I don't know how many of you were on that original list. I'm sure some of you are from younger charities who've come into being since then. But in the early days, as the registrar and the regulator of Scottish charities, a lot of effort went in to making sure that the list of charities that we took over from the Inland Revenue was up to date and accurate. And that's still a task that occupies a lot of our time. You'll hear a little bit about the statistics about how many charities are still coming into the register every year. So as registrar, our job is to keep an up-to-date list of the charities in Scotland. So we've got more than 24,000 charities. Any size of charity, there's no minimum threshold in Scotland. So charities, no matter how small, need to register with us, and the public can check that up-to-date list of charities on our website. So being a registrar is our key function, and also being a regulator is the second part of our duties. So it is our job to underpin public trust and confidence in charities. So we do that by helping raise the standards of governance, helping support you as trustees, and maybe investigating any concerns that there are about charities. To help us do that, we've mapped out 4 broad strategic objectives. You might not be able to read this. I'm sure the slides will be shared with you afterwards. But these 4 areas just describe the things that we do. So help the public have more confidence in charities, help charity trustees to understand and comply with their legal duties. We try and ensure that registration and reporting is straightforward and proportionate, and we are continually trying to review and improve the way we operate and make sure that we deliver services effectively to all our stakeholders. So those are our strategic objectives as an organisation. So what does that turn into in terms of activity? Got some numbers here from the last business year. We run a 1st of April to 31st March business year. So in the year that closed at the end of March, 1,150 applications were received from organisations wanting to become charities. And that's a pretty steady number. We get between 11 and 1,200 applications every year to come onto the register. 58% of those applications were from organisations who wanted to be a Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation, a SCIO. If you're not sure what a SCIO is, just wait 15 minutes. My colleague Martin Tyson's going to tell you all you ever wanted to know about SCIOs, so that'll be revealed. But the SCIO is a purpose-designed vehicle that's proving to be very popular amongst people who want to be charities. Next number here is 96%, and that's a fantastic figure. That's the number of charities who are registered and who are using our online annual reports service. So well done to all of you who have persevered, who've got your passwords securely scribbled down on a post-it note somewhere, and you've navigated your way through OSCR Online. Again, that was an innovation a few years ago. It's proving to be very popular, and that's the best way for you to register your annual return with us. Increasingly, we want to see more of our services moving online. That gives you 24-hour access, gives you a bit more control, and just keeps everything in the right place. So OSCR Online is proving to be a great success. I mentioned how important the roadshows, these Meet the Regulator events are. We try and do 6 every year. We've now been round most of the local authority areas in Scotland, and that's fantastic for us. So we're committed to having about half a dozen Meet the Regulator events every year. They're not all as big as this. Stornoway doesn't get quite the same crowd, but it's great for us to just go out and, as I say, engage directly with charities right round the country. The last number there, 51,000, that's the number of visits that there are to the online Scottish Charity Register, the number of searches on the register every month. So the register is a really important place for the public to get information about charities. It is used very heavily, and that agenda about being open and transparent with the information about charities so that the public know who you are, they know what you're up to. So that function of having an online register is really important for us, and you can see how many people are using that day in, day out. So our vision, I've told you why we think regulation is important. It's about underpinning public trust and confidence. And the charity brand is a fantastic brand. People in the United Kingdom, very generous, very proud, and committed to supporting charities, but we shouldn't take that trust for granted. It only takes a few bad newspaper stories or lurid headlines to dent the public's confidence. We have to be ever vigilant that our standards of governance are high, and that the public can have confidence that when they give money for a good cause, it's being managed properly and directed towards that good cause. So that's our function as the regulator, is to help the public have confidence in your activities. And how can you help with that as charities? Keep your information up to date. Things change in your charities. You may move offices, you may have changes of personnel, you might be merging, or if you're going through a process like that, we would probably know about that. You might have to get our consent for it, but keep your information with the regulator up to date. Don't just worry about us once a year. If something is significant happening in your charity, please pass that information to us so that the register is kept up to date and the information we hold about you is accurate. Particularly important if it's your principal contact who is changing. That's our main means of keeping in touch with charities. So if you have a new principal contact or change of contact information, please let us know. Tell the public more about what you do. Charities do fantastic things. Some charities are great at telling that story very well. Other charities not so good at demonstrating the impact, telling the story, showing people what happens with the money that they give to charities. And as I say, that transparency and openness agenda is a really important part. You'll be hearing a bit more from my colleague Jude later about the trustee annual report and how that can be a great shop window for you to tell the story about the impact of your activities. But telling the public about the impact that you're making is a really key way of keeping up trust and confidence. And the last thing we're suggesting that you do is deal appropriately with any complaints that you receive. It doesn't matter how small your charity is, you will be delivering services to your beneficiaries, to your local communities. Sometimes that won't go as well as you hope it would. Sometimes somebody might want to just raise a complaint with you. Try not to be defensive about that. Take the feedback as an opportunity to improve. Have a decent complaint system. It doesn't have to be very complicated, but it's a great way of making sure that you're responsive to the beneficiaries and that you can keep improving your services for the public. So this is one of our key messages. You'll hear us a lot talking about transparency as a way of underpinning trust. Another good way is to show that you are a registered charity. We have a free logo now that you can download from our website. We've updated that recently and I believe it's proving to be very popular. So if you go and download this, you can display this on your own material and just demonstrate to people that you are registered, you have a unique Scottish Charity number, and that will reassure people when they're engaging with you. So display the logo if you can. Just want to cover 4 things quickly. I'm going to talk a little bit about fundraising, highlight some guidance that we've issued in the last year, talk a wee bit about data protection, and then mention the banks. Saved them till last. So fundraising. There have been some changes recently. A couple of years ago, there were some kind of fairly negative stories in the press about the fundraising activities of some of the larger charities. And that prompted a review about the way fundraising complaints are handled and the way the standards for fundraising are set and maintained. So different systems have emerged in Scotland. So we have preserved the principle of self-regulation. When OSCR's legislation went through the Scottish Parliament, we were not given, as part of our responsibilities, the duty to oversee fundraising. So the regulator, although we're concerned about governance in general, we don't get directly involved in fundraising complaints. Instead, there's a system in place now where we want charities themselves to deal with those complaints. If you're a larger charity, you might have a 2-tier complaint system internally. So you might, if you have staff or volunteers, deal with the complaint in the first instance. If that's not resolved, it might be elevated up to you as trustees to look at. And if the complaint is still unresolved, it can be referred to an independent panel. One of the stands out in the foyer there is from the Scottish Fundraising Panel. You'll get information from Gillian about how that works. For England and Wales, the fundraising regulator is a different animal. It is dealing with complaints about charities registered south of the border. So slightly different regime there. One of our important functions is to offer guidance to charities and to trustees to help you in the job that you carry out. So on our website and through our newsletters and other communication channels, you can access a range of guidance at different levels of detail to help you with aspects of what you do. So these are just 4 of the publications. Again, we've got copies outside at our stand, and they're available on our website. So general guidance on being a charity trustee, more specific guidance on particular aspects of maybe keeping accounts or other aspects of your activity. If you've not visited our website, I really would encourage you to do that. We're trying to make the guidance as easy to read and as accessible as possible. If you want more detail, we can always provide it, but we're trying to make the guidance simple and easy to read. Data protection. There will be some changes. You've probably heard about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations that will be coming into force next May. They apply to any organisation that might collect, hold and process personal information. So most charities will be subject to the GDPR regulations. They are strengthening the rights for citizens to have control over their own data, and that has important implications for organisations who collect and process that information. So if you want to hear more about GDPR, there will be lots of events that you can participate in to find out about it. There's guidance, as I say, on the OSCR website. But the golden rules around data protection are if you are collecting data, you need to have consent, and you need to have explicit consent so that people understand what you might do with that data, and you only hold that data for as long as you need to use it. So data protection is something worth having a think about. If you have policies, they will probably need to be updated. If you don't have policies, you might want to speak to somebody who does and see if you can put some in place. And the last thing I just want to mention are the banks. No booing or hissing at this point, please. We know from the meetings we've had that the banks can be a source of concern to many charities. The banking sector is going through a lot of change itself, but I think for banks, understanding the needs of the charity sector and being organised to provide a good service to you has sometimes proved challenging. So we've been working for a couple of years now with individual banks, with the Bankers Association, to raise their level of knowledge about the sector, to relay some of the concerns that come to us, and to try ultimately to get a better service for you. I'm not saying we've cracked that problem yet, but we're aware that it is a concern for many of you, and we've issued a couple of guides, one for the banks so that they can understand about the charity sector, one for the charity sector about financial service providers. So we are doing what we can to try and improve things in that area, but as I say, I don't think we're quite at the end of that road yet. So I'm just about done. The last thing I wanted to flag up is that there's a range of ways in which, as trustees and if you have staff, you can stay in touch with things that are happening in the regulatory world. So many of you will be registered to receive our emailed newsletter. We've mentioned already the Twitter feed. We took a step into social media a couple of years ago. That's proving to be a very popular channel for connecting with things that we are doing or some of our partner organisations are doing. We've also recently opened up a page on Facebook. So if Facebook is your social media of choice, you might find OSCR there as well. But there's a whole range of ways. Please pick up the phone, email us at the address on our website. We're really happy to get approaches from you. Don't be scared. Regulator can sometimes be a scary word. We are nice people trying to be helpful, so don't be worried about approaching the regulator. And it's not just us you can approach for help. There's lots of other bodies, not just Pat's body, ACOSVO, but Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations in this area, the Glasgow Council for Voluntary Services, and we're pleased to be working with them as co-hosts for today's event. It's important for us to work with the third sector interfaces in each local area. You've heard about the Scottish Fundraising Panel and the Scottish Mediation Network, a whole range of organisations where if you need specialist advice and support, you can readily get it. So I hope that's given you just a quick picture of how we work as the regulator, the kinds of things you might want to find out more about as trustees. And as I say, I hope you find the rest of the afternoon really useful. We'll be here throughout. You'll get a chance to ask us questions in a minute. But if you don't want to raise something in the formal session, just grab us at the coffee break and we'll be happy to try and help. Thank you very much, and well done, Maureen.
Okay, yes, good afternoon everyone. My name is Martin Tyson. I'm head of casework for OSCR. What that means is I look after the team that registers new charities, and I also look after the team that conducts inquiries into charities and looks at compliance in charities. But it's the registration side that I'm going to be talking to you more about today, and what I'm going to be talking to you about is SCIOs. Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisations. Now, when Paul and the team are putting together programmes for these events, the SCIO is one thing we generally get asked about. It's something that's still relatively new to most of the charitable sector in Scotland. It was introduced not that long ago, and it's something that people want to get more familiar on. I think there'll be people in this room who actually run SCIOs, or, well, I know for a fact there's people who've been involved in setting up SCIOs and advising on charities that have moved from being unincorporated to becoming SCIOs. Hopefully, what I'm about to say won't be too new to them. If it is, there's something far wrong. But I'll also be talking about some recent developments with SCIOs and with some of the guidance that we provide. Really what I want to talk about is what is the SCIO? What's the point of it? Why was it brought in? What are the advantages of the SCIO over other kinds of legal structure for charities? And to talk a little bit about how you become a SCIO, how you move from being an unincorporated charity to being a SCIO, and also a little bit about the guidance that we brought out earlier this year for charities that are moving from unincorporated to becoming a SCIO. So, we talk about the Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation as being a legal form. Legal form is one of those phrases that we toss about quite a lot in OSCR, that lawyers talk about, and sometimes we talk about that without really explaining it enough. So I'm wanting to do that a little bit now, just as a bit of background for what the SCIO is, and give you a bit of background as to why it was brought in and what the advantages of it are. You remember David said a little while ago that we've got just over 24,000 charities on the Scottish Charity Register. So that's 24,000 organisations that have that badge of being a charity, that have the charity brand. But of that 24,000 charities, there's a whole bunch of different legal structures that those charities are established under. So there's two main groups of legal structure. There's unincorporated charities, and those are charities that are like an association or a society. It's a group of people coming together for a common purpose, but that the individual members of that association, that society, are the people who have the legal powers and the legal rights to do things. The society only exists as a contract between them. The other main group of charities on the register are incorporated charities, and those are companies, charitable companies, and SCIOs, essentially. They're a bit different. If you like, they're more than the sum of their parts. They have a legal identity of their own aside from the people who make them up. Now, that's all very sort of highfalutin. Hopefully what that means will become clear as we talk about what a SCIO can do and what the advantages are over an unincorporated charity. Okay, just having a quick look at the other groups of legal structure that the charity can use. Talked about unincorporated charities there. We've got trusts and unincorporated associations. And I think what you've got in common there between those is, in an unincorporated charity, if it has property, land, buildings, etc., it's held in the names of the individuals who make up the charity. And it's those individuals who can take action on behalf of the charity if it has to go to court, for instance. The unincorporated charity, the incorporated charity, like the company and the SCIO, they can hold property in their own names and they can take action themselves. They have what's called their own legal identity. They are legal persons, which is a weird way of speaking about it, but that is how it's summed up. A SCIO or a charitable company has its own legal personality. It can take action of itself. Okay. That table there is quite useful. What it does is set out some of the differences between the company and the SCIO. Charitable companies are regulated both by Companies House and by OSCR. The SCIO is regulated just by us, and we'll come on to what the consequences of that are. The unincorporated charities, trusts and unincorporated associations, they're just regulated by us as well. Okay, so what's a SCIO? The SCIO, it's the Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation. It's a new legal form. New in terms of legal history means it started off in 2011. It was introduced by legislation that came into force then. It was the first new legal form for charities in probably a couple of centuries. Well, since the company, I think. It's unique to Scotland. You can only be a SCIO if you are established in Scotland, if your registered office is in Scotland, and you can only be a SCIO if you're a charity. So that's a big difference with some of the other legal forms. If you're a company, you can be a charitable company or you can be a non-charitable company. It depends on your purposes and depends if you seek to be registered. You can be a charitable trust, you can be a non-charitable trust, you can be an unincorporated association that's charitable or an unincorporated association that isn't a charity. To be a SCIO, you have to be on the Scottish Charity Register. We have to have incorporated you. Okay, so that's quite a crucial thing. There's a bunch of things that follow from that. You can't be a SCIO unless you're a charity, and if you come off the Scottish Charity Register, your SCIO doesn't exist anymore. So the whole existence of a SCIO is bound up with being a charity, and we'll come on to some of the consequences of that. There is an equivalent in England and Wales, the Charitable Incorporated Organisation, and the Charity Commission for England and Wales looks after them, and there's probably a couple of those registered up here as cross-border charities as well. It's proven to be that the SCIO is proven to be a very popular legal form. We have something around, getting on for 3,000 SCIOs on the register now. Of those, around 2,000 are charities that set up as SCIOs right from the beginning. The rest of them are either charities that converted from being companies to being SCIOs, or charities that move from being unincorporated to being SCIOs. And I'll talk about both of those things later on, both of those routes to becoming a SCIO. So just to underline that, Of the new applications to become a charity that my team deals with, that Anne at the back there, she runs that team, of the applications that her team are dealing with every month, something around 60% of those are now SCIOs, so it's the most popular legal form for charities now. Most people that want to set up a charity want to become a SCIO. And we also have a pretty brisk business of moving from being an unincorporated charity to being a SCIO. Okay, so just to talk a little bit more about those points about what makes a SCIO different. As I say, to be a SCIO, you have to be on the Scottish Charity Register. We have to incorporate you. If you like, you ask us to incorporate the SCIO, we bring it into existence by putting it onto the Scottish Charity Register. What the quid pro quo for that is that you can't simply ask us to deregister the charity. The charity, if you're wanting to stop operations, if you're wanting to cease to be a charity, to be an organisation, to cease operations, you have to ask us to dissolve the charity. At that point, we take it off the register, and that's the end of its existence. It can't have a sort of non-charitable existence once it's come off the register. And that's something really important to bear in mind. If you are wanting to apply to become a SCIO, you need to bear that in mind. It's a sort of one-way street. If you become a SCIO, you become a charity, and that's it. There's no sort of non-charitable afterlife there, as there can be for some of the other legal forms where you can ask to be removed from the register and you can continue in existence. So that's one big one to think about. There's a set of regulations or two sets of regulations to do with SCIOs that set out all sorts of things, what has to be in a SCIO's constitution, some of the rules about how we should take a SCIO off the register, how we should dissolve it, and some quite complex regulations about how we should deal with SCIOs that become insolvent. So in some ways there's a lot more provision for dealing with SCIOs than there is for the normal run of charities. And I think that is to make up for the fact that for the other kinds of charities, like companies, trusts, unincorporated associations, they have other bits of law that have been running for a long time, have been added to over a long time. With the SCIO, that all had to be put together at the same time when the SCIO was introduced. So there's quite a lot of legislation around the SCIOs. One very distinctive thing about the SCIO, and it's something that we deal with a lot in registration, and it's in some ways it's a very positive thing about the SCIO in terms of getting good governance in SCIOs. The constitution of a SCIO has to include certain items, and a lot of those are things that are essentially good practice in terms of charity governance. So it has to have quite clear provisions about how the charity trustees are appointed and removed, about membership, about how meetings are held and decisions are made, among other things. So it's quite prescriptive from that point of view, but I think quite helpfully prescriptive. Another, I think, very helpful set of provisions is that there has to be a membership for SCIOs, so there has to be a minimum of 2 members, and there needs to be a minimum of 3 charity trustees. Those are rules that don't necessarily apply to other types of charity, and I think that they're very helpful rules. They keep a sort of minimum, they help to get a minimum standard of governance in SCIOs. Okay, the advantages of the SCIO. I think the big one is the one I've touched on before, and that is, if you like, legal convenience. The SCIO has a legal personality. Like a company, it can enter contracts as itself. it can go to court as itself. In a non-incorporated association, if you're the members, then it is you that take those actions, and it's you, to an extent, that bears the liability. So what the SCIO gives, because it has its own legal personality, is a degree of protection for the charity trustees and the members of the SCIO against personal liability. So the members of SCIO aren't liable to contribute to its debts when it winds up. It's the SCIO that is liable for its acts. The members and the trustees aren't liable for their acts as long as they act reasonably and consistently with their duties. Company law doesn't apply to the SCIO. As I say, there are regulations specifically for SCIOs that set out how they ought to be run, and what the duties of for instance, duties of members are, and how the SCIO can be wound up, how it can amalgamate, and how it can transfer assets. The other big advantage, and I think this is something that is quite often taken into account when people decide to incorporate as a SCIO rather than, say, becoming a company. A SCIO is subject to the same accounting rules as the normal run of charities. So whereas a company has to prepare fully accrued accounts, no matter how big or small it is, a SCIO is subject to the same thresholds as any other, as unincorporated charities. And I think that reflects the fact that the SCIO was designed to be a vehicle for small to medium-sized Scottish charities, and to be a sort of vehicle that is not overly heavily regulated compared to unincorporated charities. So if your income level requires you to provide receipts and payment accounts as an unincorporated charity, then it would be the same if you're a SCIO. If you are required to provide accrued accounts, then that would be the same as a SCIO. Okay, responsibilities of the trustees of a SCIO. In most ways, they're the same as for the charity trustees of other charities. They need to provide accounts and annual returns every year to OSCR. They are subject to much the same charity trustee duties. There's requirements to maintain a register of trustees and to give members of the public access to that if they request it. And there's also a requirement to maintain a register of members, but there's no requirement for public access to that. There are specific requirements on how a SCIO refers to itself in its documents and its publicity material, and they're slightly different from for other charities. The unique thing about SCIOs compared to unincorporated charities and indeed companies is that the members have some of the trustee duties as well. So there's a general duty on the members of a SCIO to act in the interests of the charity and to make sure that it's operating in a way consistent with its purposes. Now, most of the time, that won't be particularly relevant to members of a charity. If you think about what the members of a large membership charity will do, they're generally making decisions, if at all, during an annual general meeting. But for instance, it may be that members of a SCIO might have to consider conflicts of interest when they're making decisions. And indeed, one of the requirements for a SCIO constitution is that there needs to be provision around conflict of interest. One other thing, and this is not quite stop press, it's upcoming factors. The names of SCIOs will shortly be going on to the index of business names that Companies House runs, that will be happening in very early in the new calendar year. What that means is that SCIO names will have the same protection as company names do. So you will be protected as a SCIO from a company using your name or using a name that's too similar to your name. So that's helpful. What that also means is that SCIOs will be subject to the sensitive names provisions under the Companies Act. Now, we will be putting out guidance with assistance from Companies House later on this year. We're already looking at new applications for SCIOs in line with those requirements. So that's not anything particularly to worry about, but it's just a new bit of legislation that's going through Westminster that will start to apply from January. Okay. So, thinking about how you become a SCIO. Obviously, two big ways to do that. One is starting from scratch. If you're starting a new charity and you want to become a SCIO, how do you do that? Big requirement, you need a constitution that meets the requirements in the regulations. So it needs to have all the bits and bobs that the SCIO regulations say it has to have. And that's all the things that I've mentioned, most of which you would expect to be in a good charity constitution anyway. How you make decisions, how you appoint trustees, who the members are, etc., etc. There are a lot of model documents around now. The Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations has a model SCIO constitution that's very widely used. Some of the other specialist umbrella bodies, Early Years Scotland, for instance, have model constitutions that are specifically for their members. We would recommend you use one of those. It's probably quite hard to knit your own SCIO constitution, given the amount of provision that needs to be in there, and there are some really good models about. So I think it's a question of looking to see which one of those would suit your needs, and if you need to do modifying it, but keep that to a minimum, I would advise. The name of your SCIO needs to meet the requirements on business names, and we'll be putting out guidance on that. You need to use the correct application form. We have a specific application form for SCIOs on the on our website, and that takes you through the particular requirements for SCIOs. And you would need to provide us with declarations from your charity trustees. Okay, so that's reasonably straightforward. That's starting from scratch. If you're already a charity and you want to become a SCIO, then there are two ways to do that, and it depends where you're starting from. So if you look on the left-hand side here, if you are a charitable company or a registered society and you want to become a SCIO, there's a very, very smooth, very helpful process that's set out in the Charities Act, the 2005 Charities Act. What that does is set a very simple procedure whereby we liaise with Companies House or with the Financial Conduct Authority, depending on what's appropriate, and once we say that the charity is converted to, the charitable company is converted to a SCIO, then all of the property and rights and liabilities of the charitable company automatically move over to the SCIO. It's very straightforward, and it tends to be relatively quick. So that's the good news. If you're starting off from being a company to a SCIO, pretty straightforward. If you're starting off from being an unincorporated association or a trust and you want to become a SCIO, that's a bit less straightforward. And one of the things we've gained a lot of experience of over the 5 years or 6 years that we've been looking at this is just how difficult that can be and just how much there is to think about. So, the end of last year, earlier this year, we put together a slightly changed process for doing that. What you need to do now is to ask us to register a new SCIO, apply for a new SCIO to be created. Once that's on the register, then you apply to wind up the existing unincorporated charity. The new SCIO will have to have a slightly different name and a new charity number, because we can't have two charities on the register with the same name and the same charity number. So that's a complication. You ask us for consent to wind up the unincorporated association. As part of that, you transfer the property, rights, and liabilities of the unincorporated association across to the SCIO. And once that's done, we will remove the old unincorporated association from the register. Now, that's fairly straightforward from our point of view, but what our experience is, and the experience we have when we've talked to unincorporated charities, is that it isn't necessarily straightforward from their point of view. There's a lot to think about. What kind of property do you have? If you have land or buildings, then you need to think about how you're going to move that property from the unincorporated body to the SCIO. Do you have staff? Are you going to have to TUPE them across from the unincorporated body to the SCIO? Are you registered with the care inspectorate? You need to talk to them. What are the consequences of closing the old unincorporated charity down and moving to a SCIO? There can be quite a lot of complexity to this. There can be quite a lot of consequences of moving from an unincorporated charity to a SCIO. So what we did earlier this year is put together some guidance around that with help from various people in the charity sector, from the care inspectorate, from Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, early as Scotland, and we've got a suite of fact sheets and bits of guidance that highlight what things you need to think about, depending on what kind of charity you are, depending on what your charity does, and what are the regulators it's involved with, what kind of property it holds, what are the things you need to think about before you move from being unincorporated to being a SCIO. So if that's something that you're thinking about, or if you advise charities on this process, I would really point you towards what's on the website there, because that has been prepared out of the experience of charities and advisors. And I think our strong advice there is do your work up front. Have your discussion, think about what's involved in moving your charity from being unincorporated to being a SCIO, and be aware of what the possible issues are, how long it might take you, what's involved, and take advice if you can find it. You probably can't really see it. That's the register entry for a charity that has been incorporated as SCIO, that's moved from being unincorporated. We do actually highlight those on the register now, and that sort of tells you what the process has been, but I suspect you're not going to be able to see much of that. Okay, that's probably all I've got to say about SCIOs. Obviously we're going to have a Q&A. You might well have particular questions about the process, about SCIOs. It might be something you're thinking about. And if you want to catch myself or Anne or Mary or any of our colleagues who are sitting at the back there during break, very happy to talk to you about that, but also happy to answer questions as well. Thank you.
So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk a little bit about narrative reporting. And here we have what I'm really going to look at. I'm going to just look at a little bit about why it's important, the Trustee Annual Report. I'm going to talk about who's responsible for doing it, what the focus should be, what makes a good Trustee Annual Report, and some kind of pros, some good things to do with your Trustee Annual Report. and some things that you should avoid. So that's what we're going to do today, and it doesn't take too long, and again we'll have time for questions at the end. So we've already talked about what is our vision. Our vision is of charities you can trust and that provide public benefit. Clearly, we're a very small part of that, and it's really charities themselves that inspire that public trust and confidence. And we know from our experience that, in fact, charities tend to hold quite a high level of public trust and confidence. And this was reinforced in our last surveys, where the majority of people, about 54%, said that their trust and confidence in charities had not shifted over time, over the last couple of years. And 8% said, in fact, their level of trust and confidence in charities had risen. And that was pretty impressive, because around that time, we were getting these headlines which were extremely negative about charities, around the fundraising stuff, people thinking that salaries were too high and that nobody in charities should ever get a salary because that would just absolutely be the worst thing in the possible world. So there was a real kind of media kind of negative storyline going on, and even at that time public trust and confidence in charities was quite high. However, we do know that these headlines and stories like this and ongoing stories like this can put a dent in public trust and confidence. And the Trustee Annual Report is a small way of actually trying to do something about that. So what's the importance of a Trustee Annual Report? I suppose the first thing I should say, and I would be hounded out if I didn't say it, is it's absolutely a legal requirement. So you can't get away from doing it. It's something that you have to do every year, and you have to send to us. And narrative reporting, the Trustee Annual Report, part of your annual reports and accounts, is part of that. So it's a real requirement that you have to fulfil. But actually, that's sort of not the most important bit. The most important bit is it's a real way of you starting to tell your story about your charity, about what it does, what it's there to do, and the impact that it's having. So it's a good way of telling the story of your charity. And it's a key way of being transparent about what it is that you do. And as David mentioned earlier, as we mention all the time, transparency comes through every time we do our surveys as a key way of making sure that you are keeping that public trust and confidence high. So the Trustee Annual Report is a big part of that. So who's responsible for writing the Trustee Annual Report? And if you ask people in a room, and I think we asked that in our lovely little Menti that's not working, who is responsible for writing your Trustee Annual Report? Is it your accountant? Is it your independent examiner? Or indeed, is it your poor treasurer that every year goes a bit grey when there's that time of the year? The truth is, it's none of that. It is in fact a collective responsibility of every single trustee on the trustee board. Now, this does not mean that you know what it's like to write by committee, sit down and everybody's sharing in the writing of the Trustee Annual Report, but it means you're collectively responsible for making sure that it's a document that you're proud of, happy with, that tells the story of your charity, that really outlines how it is that you've made a difference during the preceding year. So it's a collective responsibility. It's not the poor treasurer or it's a poor chair that has to run off every year and write the Trustee Annual Report. So what should the focus of your Trustee Annual Report be? And I suppose the most important thing is that you always have to go back to what is it that your charity is there to do. The objectives of your charity should always be clear. And actually, revisiting that, looking back at your governing document, which is maybe gathering dust in a cupboard somewhere, is always a good thing to do. Check that you really know what they are and that they still are as real today as they were when you first started. So making sure that those objectives are very clear. And then from there, you can tell that story. This is what we're here to do. And this is what we've done. And aren't we just amazing? And look at the impact we've had and look at the lives we've managed to alter in a positive way. So what makes a good Trustee Annual Report? It's quite simple, really. It should be a document that's easy to understand, that reaches people and that tells people the story of your charity. And there's a few key elements that need to be in there. Here we've got why, who, what. The why is very simple. Why were we set up? What's our objective as an organisation? What are we meant to do? That's what I was just stressing before. That's a key part of what you need to be reinforcing. Don't assume that just because your charity's been around for 50 years that everybody knows what it is you're meant to be doing. They probably don't. And if there's somebody new who you want to reach, they're not going to know. So make sure that key, the reason for being, the reason that you are there, make sure that's very clear in your trustee annual report. And then from there, you've got to be clear about who is it I'm working with, who am I working with, and who have I worked with over this past year? Who have I reached in this past year? Some clear identification of that group that you've worked with. And then you get to what can be slightly confusing sometimes. We've got outputs, outcomes, impact. But you mustn't get too tied up on that. It's just really showing that what are the activities and what's really the impact of these activities. And perhaps a good example of that is, let's think of a youth employability charity, right? A charity that's working with young disadvantaged people. And it's trying to get people into employment, say. And during the past year, in terms of the first what, it's trained 80 people in different vocational areas. It's managed to train 80 people. Of those 80 people, 76, the second what, managed to actually get a vocational qualification. Fantastic. But of these 76, 55, or 50, let's be a bit more generous, let's say 65 have gotten into full-time employment that they wouldn't have managed to get if they didn't have their vocational training. So you've had a real impact on a significant number of people through your activity during that year. So don't get tied up in the definitions. There's courses, university courses devoted to, what these different things mean. Just make sure that what you're doing is you're showing what I've done, what were the immediate outcomes of that, and look at that. All these people have got jobs, or all these people have managed to, all these people have got food, or these people have got wells, or whatever it is you're working in. Make sure that it's very clear how your actions have led to a specific impact. So what are the benefits of a good trustee annual report? We've talked a little bit about that already. There's the whole issue of just that general bit of transparency. That's increasingly important in today's environment, where there's quite a lot of desire to knock good things down, to get bad media stories. They get much better headlines than good media stories. So that transparency is very important. I think in the bottom here, I've got to help deflect bad publicity. If you can be very clear and transparent about what you've done during any given year, and the way that you've done that, and the way you've used your money, then nobody can say that you haven't done what you said you were going to do, and that you've used your money unwisely. So really having a sense, having that transparency at the front of what you're doing. Don't be embarrassed about what you're doing. Shout about it. Show people what you're doing. It's a very important thing. I suppose I'd say it's even more important now that we, for instance, are publishing reports and accounts on our website. So we're either doing that through links that you share with us. So if you've got links to your accounts, please do that. Or we're actually publishing the ones that you send us if you have an income of over 25,000 or you're a SCIO. So this is another way that people can go on and look at your accounts. It's a way that you can actually show what you're doing. It's a way of being transparent, and it's something that we will be continuing doing over the next wee while. And what we've noticed is that information, the accounts and reports, people are clicking on them. They're very interested in them. They're going in and having a look. So it's important to be transparent. It's important to do it as well as you possibly can. And it's a good way of just reassuring the public that you're doing what you said you were going to do, and that you're using your money, their money, other people's money wisely. And I think a good, well-written trustee annual report is a way that you can actually not just share your story, you can get other people interested in your story. We all know what it's like when you go to an AGM or something, and the finance guy stands up and everybody goes, oh. It's not the exciting bit of the meeting. The exciting bit of the meeting is hearing what you've done, or hearing from somebody who's been impacted by your charity during any given year. That's the bit that people want to hear. So in fact, the trustee annual report is a small window onto your activities, And you can use that to get other people to be interested in your work. And what I would say is that sometimes when we talk about the trustee annual report, it seems as if we're talking about another extra piece of work that people have to do. Of course, you have to do it anyway legally. But clearly, if you've got other people you're reporting to, other people you're talking to, other people you want to share your information with, you shouldn't be doing this 17 times. You should be producing one good thing that you can use in different ways with different organisations. And we're talking a lot with other organisations at the moment about how to better harmonise those different reporting requirements so that people are not reporting in numerous ways to numerous different people. So transparency, getting your story out, showing what a fantastic job you're doing as a charity, that's a key benefit of a good trustee annual report. So, top tips. And these all, I must say, this is really Laura Anderson, is another SMT colleague of mine, and this is her baby, and she gets very excited about trustee annual reports. So these are her top tips. So tell the story. Make sure that it's something that people would be interested in. No matter what you're doing, you'll be passionate about it. Make sure you're telling that story in a passionate way. The second one's a bit more boring. You've got to comply with what it says in the regulations about when you should report and what should be in your reports. That's a very simple thing, but it's actually quite important because, again, in terms of people checking our register, checking your charity, if you don't do that stuff, people get a bit concerned that, in fact, if you can't do that simple thing, are you actually doing the rest of the stuff well as well? So, just be compliant and get in the good habit of getting stuff in on time and doing it properly. Take ownership and engage. So what that means is, as a trustee board, again, you don't all have to write it, but make sure that you are in charge of what's going in there, you know what stories you want to tell, and you know how you want to start developing that part of your reporting requirement. And be creative wherever possible. That's something that hasn't always been done in annual reports and accounts, because the important part has been the money side. And that is massively important. But actually, getting that story out is just as important, if not more so, in terms of getting the public on your side and getting people to really understand what it is that you're doing. So be creative wherever possible. And yes, be proportionate. What is adequate for your charity? I'm not talking about a big, massive report. If you're a tiny charity, you're reporting on your activities in a way that's suitable for you. So just think about what's right for your charity. What not to do. So what you mustn't do is, or what you might want to avoid doing. So the first thing is, don't leave it to the last minute. Don't leave it to one person. That's not just not fair, it's not right. I think my favourite one on this is don't cut and paste what you wrote last year. You'd be surprised how often that is the case. And eventually somebody will spot it. They might not spot it the second year, they might not spot it the third year, but they'll probably spot it the fourth year and they'll think, are they actually doing anything? It seems like they're doing the same thing every year or nothing at all. So make sure that you're actually thinking every year, what is it we've done this year? Let's report on that. And I think the final one's quite important because I think sometimes in the desire to show how great we are as organisations, we shy away from maybe some things that we've had to alter during the year or readjust because the context has changed. So sometimes if things don't go so well or you haven't quite achieved something, it's good to be transparent about that as well. Because no doubt somebody will know that's happened and they will pick you up on that, and it's better to say, we didn't do this because of X, Y, Z, and we did this instead because it was much more adequate for our purposes at that time. So don't necessarily shy away from stuff that maybe didn't go quite as well as you might have liked. So I'm just going to go through 3 short examples and just little pictures actually of different ways of reporting. And I suppose we've got a small one, a medium one and a large one. And again, this is about making sure that what you're doing is adequate for your purposes as an organisation. The first one's a very small faith-based charity based in Edinburgh. And it's a very simple thing, and you've probably all seen something like this, but it's actually extremely clear, because on one side it's got the objectives, you can see up here. On the other side it's got the activities that the organisation used to reach these objectives, very clear, and then pictures. you know, you may say not the most exciting, but it's more exciting than not having pictures. So it's just nicely visually appealing, and it's very clear about what happened in the year and why you did what you did, because it stems from your objectives. So a nice small charity doing a very good job of making it very clear what they've done. If we go to the medium-sized organisation, that's Stirling Voluntary Enterprise, this was actually an addendum to their trustee annual report. But again, it's just an illustration of the ways some people like to use information and use little illustrations to bring it alive. And you'll see increasingly a lot of this kind of what you might call infographic type stuff. But it can really lift out figures. It's using figures and little sentences just to show the impact of your work during any given year, and it can be a very effective way of showing what you've done. And if we go to the final example, it's got dogs, so people who love dogs love this. It's very visually appealing, but the best thing about this particular report is on one side here you've got your goals, and then you've got a very clear tick or whatever, if you know, in terms of, oh, we achieved this, this is ongoing, we didn't quite achieve this. It's extremely clear, and then it very much links with the goals that you have for the year going forward. So again, it's a good way of using what you have, using the nice illustrations of the dogs, which people know will appeal to a big public, but also making it very clear what you've done during the year and what goals you've achieved or not achieved. And there's lots of tools that you can use to change the way you do your trustee annual report. And I've got a few up there. A lot of those would be free or cheap for charities, and they can be accessed. And you may have somebody in your midst that loves doing this kind of stuff. We know we've got somebody in our organisation that totally delights in doing this stuff. And it can really be a way of just actually starting to experiment and put a couple, you know, one year, just put a couple of new things in. And then the next year you can develop that. So you've got some tools there that you can use, things like Picture Chart, Canva and Biteable. But also what we've got up there is, you know, once you've got information and something that you're proud of, a trustee annual report that you're proud of, share it in other ways and maybe do little videos of little bits and pieces. You'll see this year that we've increasingly used video as a way of starting to try and communicate with people who maybe don't, you know, prefer that way of learning about something. I have an 11-year-old, and him and all his friends, if they want to learn anything at all, they go on YouTube and learn it that way. So when you're talking about the next generation coming up, which you may want to reach at some point in time, you better start thinking about communicating your annual report in other ways. And that's it. That's where I'm going to finish. I hope that was a very short run through of that. It's on your slides and so on. But it's just to say, don't be afraid of it. It's your window, it's your opportunity to shout about how great you are. And people really do want to read about the stories of your charities in creative and interesting ways. So thank you very much, and I'll pass back to Pat.